Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Pedicola. Are you getting just a little bit tired of this virus scare, the lockdown, the sheltering in place? I mean, doesn't it sometimes get hard to even believe it when the sun is shining and all these flowers are out? And I'm starting to see that people, although they're still wearing the masks, there's a little bit of like, this is too hard to hold on to. And it is. I don't know about you, but whenever I get sick, and I don't get sick very often because I do not like to get sick, I'll handle it for about 3 days and then it's like, well, hey, hello, that's enough. It's time to be better. And if it takes longer than that, it's really, really hard. So you may be feeling a little bit of pressure in that regard. And what I totally understand, because I always used to run away from my challenges. And this is what this is. This is a challenge. The virus scare, the virus threat, the pandemic is just one of many challenges. Hi, thank you for joining. One of many challenges. Hey, hi Hugh, thanks for joining. It is one of the many challenges that we run across in our lives. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today is an approach that you want to take with all the challenges in your life. Anything that comes up that's difficult. But I have to share with you first that I used to run away. And a lot of that had to do with an early pattern, childhood pattern, in which I'm also going to talk to you about in a moment. But the pattern was I didn't like to be rejected. I did not like to be uncomfortable. I did not like to be in pain. And so whenever that came up, hi, thanks for joining again. Whenever that came up, I would run away. So after I lost my first job, I ran away to another job. And when I lost that job, I ran away to another job. And it was only when my husband, my first husband, left me, well, I actually ran away again, but I ran away to the right place. I actually ran away to a spiritual retreat, which transformed my life, which changed the way in which I looked at my life, the way in which I looked at myself, and empowered me to start showing up. But the biggest change was when my mother died. When my mother died, just before she died, she imparted to me the most important wisdom of my life. This is the theme of my life. This is what caused me to create a documentary film series. This is my whole business called Secrets of Life and Death. It's about living and dying without regret. And she told me, live your passion or die with regret. She not only told me that, she embodied it. Her whole life was embodying living your passion. And you know, the funny thing was, she actually felt regret at the end of her life because she ran out of time, because she was only 77 when she died and she hadn't finished everything. So what I'm inviting you to do is to take every opportunity, every challenge as an impetus for changing, for doing better in your life, for making a difference in your life, for seeing where the flaws are, for seeing where the weaknesses or the blind spots are. So let's take a look at that for a minute. Business. How are you doing in business right now? If you're a solo entrepreneur, a coach or a healer, you might be feeling the pinch right now unless you've been really good at saving money. But even if you were good at saving money, how are you set up for moving into the new reality scheme of online marketing? Have you been relying on face-to-face presentations and workshops? Well, they may come back, or with this virus, it may be a long time before that completely comes back in the universe again. You don't know. Yeah, the virus may go away for a while, but the news is, assumption is that it's going to come back again and again and again, just like other kinds of viruses, until we have developed an immunity or capacity to live through it. And this virus isn't like any other virus that we've run into before. It's pretty horrific. Well, now there have been other viruses like that, but they haven't come to our country. So this is the first time we're living through this kind of virus. And the news is that there are probably going to be more and worse. So this social distancing, which is really hard for human beings because we are social beings, the social distancing may actually start to be part of our new reality. So business. Do you have money right now? How are you going to make money in the future? What about health? Boy, the virus certainly brings up a lot of issues around health, because those people who are more weak, that are more compromised, need to even be more super careful than the rest of us. At least that's the intelligence. So this might be an opportunity to look at your health and say, well, how can I make it better? How can hi, thank you for joining. How can I make this situation teach me something about the way in which I'm living my life, my health? Am I eating well? And I have to say, it's really normal for human beings, for mammals, to eat more when they're stressed out. So you might even want to examine how you handle stress. Have you been handling stress for a long time by overeating? And now you're in a situation where you're really in a pressure cooker and you say, whoa, maybe it's time to look at a new way of adjusting to this, or a new way of dealing with this. Last year, at the beginning of the year, I totally changed my diet and the diet of my husband because of some information that was conveyed to me on the internet. And I realized that I was at risk for Alzheimer's because my father died of Alzheimer's, and I changed my whole diet. This is another opportunity that sort of pressures you to look at where your blind spots are, where your weaknesses are. And the virus, because it's putting us in a pressure cooker of staying at home, of being with our family, or being alone, these things bubble to the surface. Hi, thank you for joining. Love the heart. They bubble up to the surface, and you can either ignore them or you can lean into them. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do, is to lean in to the challenge. That's what a leader does. That's what people who are change makers do. Those are people who make opportunity out of challenges. So that's my most important message to you right now, is lean into the challenge. Be curious and see what you can learn. One of the things that I have noticed, that as a psychosocial analyst, that are the main blocks to taking advantage of these crises, is one, inaction, and the other two is wrong action. Inaction are a bunch of excuses that we pull out or even manifest to prevent ourselves from moving forward. For example, I don't have enough time. Well, hello, if you're at home, you do have enough time, really. Of course, if you're one of the nurses on the front lines, maybe you don't have time. Oh, my family's living with me. I can't move forward until this is over. Well, this might be an issue that you've had all your life, of putting your family ahead of you. This is an opportunity to say, maybe I need to start coming first. Another one is not enough money. Sometimes it takes an investment of your time and money before you can make things better. And sometimes you have to do that before you have either, because you make yourself a priority. So wrong action. Wrong action is when you use the same kind of action you've been taking all along, and you sort of disguise it a little bit. You pretend that it's different, but it's really the same action over and over again. And my heart goes out to you, because the reason why we do this is those patterns are deeply embedded from childhood, and it's really hard to change them. So I have found in my work with my clients that there are a number of patterns that we develop in our childhood that keep us stuck. Those are the true blocks. And we don't even realize that they're holding us back because they are so subconscious. My own pattern was being a people pleaser. And this held me back. This is why I kept on running away all those times, is that I didn't want to be around people that I wasn't pleasing because I felt horrible. Another pattern is the controller. This is a person who feels like they have to be in charge in order to feel safe. And then there's the rebel. And this person wants to be in charge and in control, but they don't try to get the world to accommodate them. They actually court disaster. So how do I work with these people? Well, the pleaser initially seems like a good person to work with because they want to please you and they work so hard to please you. But ultimately, they need to learn how to please themselves. They need to stand in their power. They need to take risks and put themselves on the line. And sometimes I find that my pleasers turn into controllers when they are invited to take that step. And I'm inviting you to take that step right now, which is to do something out of your comfort zone, to lean into the discomfort and be curious. Now, the controller, their journey is to surrender, is to let go of control and to trust. Oh, that's the word I'm going to be using next. Remember that word, trust. So then the rebel, that's kind of like the controller and the rebel at the same time. Somebody who really wants to be the total opposite of the pleaser and displease you. For that person, hi, thank you for joining. For that person, I invite them to ask if they are really getting what they want, to go back to the lessons of the virus or whatever challenge they're going through right now and say, is this what you want? And if you are not getting what you want, if you're not satisfied, if you do not feel fulfilled, maybe it's time to surrender, to let go of your control and trust somebody. Now, there was one other area, hi, thank you. There was one other area besides the health and business, and the third one was love. Did I talk about love? So love is the third area that you may find that you have some blind spots. And so here you are in your home, stuck in your home, and you are either alone, and hi, thank you for joining. You're alone and you're saying, well, maybe this isn't working for me. Now, I gotta think that that's really hard to be living by yourself. And you've been used to being with people on the outside, and now suddenly the only way in which you have contact with people is by Zoom. Human beings actually need a certain amount of tactile contact. And so you may be starting to think you want some changes in your life. If so, that's good. So then your next thing is to lean into that challenge and say, well, what is my next step? What do I need to bring a relationship, more intimacy into my life? Now, if you're already living with somebody, then you may find that there are other things that surface, areas that are not working well for you. And so you say to yourself, do I want to leave this person? Now, generally, I don't recommend that because I find in my therapeutic work that the person that you are with is exactly the person you need to be with. Unless they're abusive, in which case I take that back. But if they're not abusive, except maybe verbally or emotionally, they are there to teach you to be strong, to stand up for yourself. And my experience as a psychosocial analyst is that if you don't work it out with this person, you're going to just choose another person down the road that does exactly the same thing. So you might as well get it worked out with this person. It's a lot easier, especially if you're in my age. You don't want to start all over again. Although, knock on wood, it might happen. You never know. You do not know what the universe has planned for you. So I was talking about those were the three areas. The fourth area is purpose. And that might be coming up for you right now too. Are you living your purpose? Now, why would that come up? Because the virus puts us face to face with our mortality, that you could actually die. The question I always like to ask is, if you were to die tomorrow, would you die with no regret? And if the answer is no, it's time to start looking at that and saying, what have I been leaving in the closet? What have I not been doing to fulfill myself? Because as you know, the number one complaint of the dying, the number one regret of the dying is not living a life true to oneself. And that was, well, my mother lived a life true to herself, but she still had regrets. Remember I said the word trust before. So trust is what you need. Trust is what you need to be a leader. Trust is what you need to be if you're going to be a solo entrepreneur, if you are selling yourself. Now, if you're selling widgets, all you need to do is find a way to sell those widgets cheaper than anybody else, which means going to some third world country and letting them produce it and then underselling everybody else. But if you are selling in the coaching market or in the art world or in the performance world, you have to stand out. As Tony Robbins, the guru of coaches, says, to be sufficient to just be ho-hum in the coaching world, you have to be awesome. To be successful, you have to be outstandingly phenomenal. And how do you do that? You don't put a lot of lipstick on. You don't put a lot of fancy clothing on. You don't learn new tricks. You actually become more yourself. You become more of who you really are. And that is our life journey, to become more of who we truly are. It is a journey because as children, we are taught not to be who we are. We are taught to hide ourselves. We are taught to play it safe, to please others, or maybe to control things because it isn't safe to be who you are. So the journey of adulthood is to rediscover who you were as an infant, but in adult form. So you actually have to reconnect with that inner child, because that's where all the creativity is. You have to reconnect with her, but reassure her or him that it's safe, that it's okay. And that's the work that I do. I empower leaders and change makers like you to heal those inner wounds. Now, what I have found in my own experience is that you can't do that alone. I've tried, and there are a lot of modalities out there. We love the quick fix, the healer that suddenly transforms your life. And I've had those experiences. I've gone to some coaches and they do this healing, and suddenly I sign up a bunch of clients and I say, oh my gosh, but it fades because it isn't from inside. It's just a shift in your center, and then you shift back because that's the pattern. And that is the issue, the pattern. There is a certain amount of change that you can create with energy work, with tapping, with mindset work. But it's the patterns, the deeply entrenched patterns that go all the way back to our childhood that are even subconscious, those are the ones that are difficult to change, that resist change, that feel so comfortable like an old shoe that you don't even know that you're wearing it. So what kind of patterns am I talking about? Well, for example, pleasing. It's a habit that is so comfortable, that feels so rewarding, and of course, in this culture and as human beings, being pleasing is rewarded. People appreciate it when you are pleasing. You don't get a lot of flack. You don't get a lot of resistance. People smile at you. They may even reward you. And as women, this is a very, very deeply entrenched pattern because women are expected to be pleasing. And when you suddenly aren't pleasing, you're seen as a bitch, as being a ball buster, as being angry, as being defensive, as being out of control, as being resistant, instead of just standing up for yourself. And if you have insecurities about yourself, which is also part of the pattern of the pleaser, is not good enough, not worthy, not valuable, not important, unwanted, if you have that pattern, breaking through that pattern of pleasing takes work. And that, of course, is my specialty. I used to work on the Navajo reservation with emotionally challenged children, Navajo children. And before that, I worked in Las Vegas with emotionally challenged children. And they were teenagers, so of course they were the hardest human beings in the world to work with because they are like so resistant. And what I was able to do was to identify the process, the steps that they could take to change. And I also found out the most important motivator was not points. It was not rewards like going to the movies. It was affirmation and social approval. I don't know that the behaviorists ever learned this, but it is the most important thing. And that's where a good coach comes in, because that coach will help you to get through the difficulties of being yourself, the resistance. So there are a number of things that get in your way of being yourself. One is the pattern. It's like you don't even realize that you're in that pattern. Two is that when you actually start to change and your coach says, try this, and you go, oh my goodness, I don't want to do that. That's scary. That's the resistance. You need to work through that, and a good coach will hold you accountable. But then there is the community. The community that you are in right now has a vested interest in keeping you the way you are. Well, of course. They have been receiving the largesse, the rewards of you being a pleaser. And your children are not going to be particularly happy if you suddenly restrict their access to you. If you suddenly set boundaries, if you suddenly set rules and requirements when they've had unlimited access. And the same goes for your partner or spouse. Suddenly you are setting boundaries, you are putting your foot down, you're saying, no, I'm not going to listen to this. And it can be really challenging to do this alone, because these are the people who know your weaknesses. I remember when I was working on the Navajo reservation, those children, those teenagers, knew every trick in the book, and they had a sixth sense of what was going to be your weakness. Well, you don't think your own children know that? They know it in their heart of hearts. And your husband too, because he's been doing this for a long time as well. And it's not like they're doing it vindictively or meanly. They're just trying to protect themselves. They're just trying to take care of their own needs. So we can understand that. But coach helps you to do that. And that's what I realized when I was going through my own journey and needed to step into my power and my strength and my leadership was to have a decent coach. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. Now, the interesting thing that I found out about being a coach, and I belong to Toastmasters, and Toastmasters not only being a great place to learn how to be a competent speaker, in fact, an outstanding speaker, it also teaches you how to be a leader. But if you do not have a good mentor, you can go through all the steps and not learn how to be a real leader. Leadership takes opportunity, it takes effort, and it takes guidance. It takes guidance in being willing to take a stand, being willing to show up. Most importantly, being willing to be rejected. And that's what a good coach needs to be able to do too. Because as a coach or a healer or an artist, you are not going to succeed in pleasing everybody. Not everybody is your client. So there are going to be some rejections out there. The trick is to accept who you are, to trust yourself. So that's trust. Trust yourself. That's the most important thing. Number 2 is trust the universe. Trust the universe. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a spiritual idea. It's like sitting back and believing that this whole process that you're going through right now has a greater purpose. That you can trust that what is happening to you in your life is actually going to make you stronger and more able to be of service in this world. Because as a spiritual being, you have a purpose. You have something that you need to impart to this world before you leave. And everything that shows up, the good, the bad, the ugly, the infuriating, are all there to hone your spirit. So that's trust in the universe. And I remember the time that I learned that particular message. It was a really powerful moment. I just recently shared in a speech about after my first year of being at a spiritual retreat, a Sufi camp with my teacher. And I had decided to stay for, after 2 months of doing chanting and breathing and slow movement and getting into these amazingly exalted states. And this had happened just after I'd lost my husband, my first husband. I think I mentioned that at the very beginning. So I did these amazing workshops. And we had a break between the main workshop and the extension, which I had been invited to continue on because I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Why not? So I had made plans with some of the other students who were staying on to go to a Pueblo dance. We were in New Mexico, and the Pueblo was Acoma, or also known as Sky City, a rock literally protruding from the desert floor where these Native Americans, these Pueblos, had built a village years ago. And there's a whole lot of story about that. But anyway, we're all off to go see this harvest dance. And we all pile into my VW, my very old VW van, and head off down I-40, heading west. And we stop in Albuquerque to pick up another student. And while we're there, she gets into the car, and I try to start the van, and it won't start. And I keep on trying, it won't start. And I feel like welling up in me, this anger and frustration. Now you have to remember that I had just lost my husband about 8 months ago. He had walked out on me for another woman. So I had all this pent-up frustration. And where am I going in my life? And here, my major vehicle has given up on me. And so there was this tendency, this urge to start screaming and cursing and whining and complaining. And then I thought, because there had been this other part of myself that had been developing over the course of 2 months doing this spiritual retreat, that I was a different person, that there was another way. And that was to trust in the universe, to trust in the moment. And so I pulled out my idiot manual. I opened up the back of the VW van where the engine is, and I started doing the testing to find out what was wrong. And just as I figured out what was wrong, a man shows up at my shoulders and he says, "May I help you?" Of course, I laughed. "Well, only if you're a VW mechanic." He says, "Well, I am." You could have knocked me over with a feather. I said, "Wow, well, great. This is what I've diagnosed. Does that sound right?" And he said, "Yeah, sounds right." I said, "Well, do you happen to have the part?" "Oh, no, I'll go check." And he went off to his studio to find out. And sure enough, he had the part. And he put it in my van. And the van started up. And we headed off to Acoma. And just as we hit the highway, it dawned on me. It was Labor Day. None of the other repair shops were open. I truly believe that the universe in that moment was waiting for me to make the decision. How many times do you feel like you have that moment when you can choose to be your higher self or your lower self? I chose the higher self, and the universe rewarded me. That's what trusting the universe is. And we can choose that even now. We can choose to be frustrated. We can choose to be angry at the politicians. We can choose to rebel and stop keeping our distance. Or we can take the higher ground. And we can trust that everything that's going on right now is for a purpose. So that's trust number 2. Now, trust number 3 is trust your people. That is trust that they who are meant to be your clients are going to be there for you. They're going to show up. And not to worry about it too much, that they are there. And the more you become who you really are, the more you become authentic, the easier it will be for them to find you. So that's the work I do. Let's see, is there anything else? Yes, leadership. I don't know if I need to share this with you right now. But after my mother, why not? After my mother died, I decided to make a film series called Secrets of Life and Death. Well, actually, I decided to make one film, and it morphed into 3 films. And I was just out of becoming a people pleaser. And I had to be a leader. That is, to get people to help me to do the work. Because filmmaking is a group enterprise. You cannot do it alone. And so you need to attract people who are going to help you out. And at that time, I did not have a lot of bucks. So I was having to get people who I could motivate to help me, that would show up, that could be reliable. And I actually developed that capacity. But there were moments when I wanted to quit. There were moments when I was afraid that I was going to be a failure, which of course people pleasers are always worried about. And what I found was that my commitment to the people that I had interviewed, to the people who had been in my project, kept me from giving up. And that is often part of leadership, is that you owe it to your people. Hi, thank you for joining. We're talking about utilizing the containment of the virus as an opportunity for discovering what you need to change in your life, to use it as a way to break through the barriers and blocks to your success in whatever area, whether it's health or love or wealth or purpose, that it becomes the vehicle, the fuel to pushing you through, to lean in to what you're going through instead of pulling back, instead of resisting, instead of being angry. Okay, so we're just finishing up here. I've already talked to you about, yes, the resistance and what holds you back. And I have talked about the pattern and how that holds you back. The controller, the pleaser, the rebel, and how those patterns are so deeply entrenched that they are unconscious and you don't even realize it. And I've talked to you about the value of having a good coach. Now, choosing the coach is a whole different level. First, you need to decide that maybe you need a coach. And you may need to start coming up with excuses for not taking action. And you may need to take new action, and maybe getting a new coach is the action you need to take. But today, all I'm inviting you to do is to join my Facebook group, Live Your Brilliance. And there is a link in the comments section if you want to go ahead and do that, to get more trainings like this that will help you to see where you're holding back and what you need to do. Also, I have a couple of speaking gigs, a couple of webinars coming up that will go even more deeply into this issue of leadership and how you need to show up. Why this is so important. Why leadership, first of all, you're not born with it, although there certainly are plenty of people who are charismatic. I guarantee you that somewhere along the line they learned that. And two, even if you take the training in leadership, that is not going to teach you how to be a true leader. I have seen so many people who show up pretending to be leaders who are not leaders. This is the definition of leadership by the former President Dwight D. Eisenhower. He said, leadership is the art of getting somebody to do something you need done because they want to do it. They need to do it. Wouldn't that be a great skill to have? That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Come back because I have a few more shares, a few more Facebook Lives to give on utilizing this special time as an opportunity to see where you need to change and to take new action. Be brilliant and bye for now.